words.
Choose your words wisely.
You're feeling a little bit measured with your movements.
Wow.
Because you had
Good
lots
choice.
to eat. I suggest let's pick up something and run with it. Just
No. I'm sure there's security.
get your blood flowing again.
There's security right outside this room, just waiting for that. Please don't.
You know, you all did that 2 weeks ago. Anyway, we'll move on. So again, we are ready for the second half. We want to thank everyone for making sure the booths and the various representatives were well engaged. I went across to the Scotia booth. I went across to the BP booth. I spoke to some of the girls from
And we did not go to the U-Share booth.
You know, we need to go there to take
I saw there was a prop that says always late, and I'm seeing a lot of people holding that one, always late for work. Not me. No, not me.
Moving swiftly along.
We also have a video that we want to show you.
I'm always late sometimes.
I'm not late.
I feel ashamed.
And he's on at 6 a.m. So what did you have to do before that? Sleep?
Yeah, sometimes. What we're going to do, we're going to show you the video one more time. And we left one of our booths and sponsors out strategically because we're getting ready after the video for the first giveaway of the conference. Let's check it out one more time. Exciting stuff. So we get ready now for the first giveaway. Our friends at Southern Sales Car Rentals. I know I made a joke earlier on concerning sometimes, you know, we see rentals and so many of the, well, they call it the wet man or the wet girl, the teeters, but they actually deal with specific brands.
Never heard wet girl before, by the way.
Yeah, there's also the wet girl.
Have you heard that? No.
Yeah,
no, exactly.
No, the BHP,
You heard
hear about the wet girl.
No, see?
But no wet men and wet girl available here, my friends. We're talking here Audis, Isuzus, Kias, and Mazdas. That's the brands that they associate themselves with. And our friends at Southern Sales are going to give you a chance to basically move around, have a driver and a car available at your beck and call, probably just for a day, I would imagine. So we're getting ready to do that giveaway. Let's call forward our rep.
That's right. We're calling Shiraz Ahmad from Southern Sales Limited.
Yes. Let's give it up for Southern Sales, my friends. We know the name, quality, and service for years. We call forward the bowl from our Southern Sales team, and of course, we'll ask for you to do the needful. All those who would have put their cards into the mix. Shala,
Okay. Wow.
No responsibility, Shala.
I'm sorry if you don't get called. Okay, I'm not looking. Y'all stop pressuring me. I feel pressured.
Shake it up a little bit. Yes. That copybook page, somebody put a name on there, boy?
Fat line copybook. I think I have one.
All right. We have a name here. The winner, Stacey Israel from First Citizens
Bank.
Investment Services Limited. Stacey, congratulations.
Where is Stacey?
Now, Stacey, you're getting a driver on a car to move with, not the actual car, huh? Just to remind you.
Stacey, if you need a friend for the day, I am available. You could go to my arrow. Can we go anywhere?
Yeah, anywhere? Drive anywhere. Any part, yes.
Congratulations, Stacey.
Let's get up.
Stacey's asking, where can I go with this thing?
Yeah.
Any boundaries? Can I drive to Tobago?
You can drive all the way to Shakari, girl. Just drive.
Stacey just ignoring me, you know. Stacey, I thought we were friends. No? You see? Your friends get a car and they leave you behind. All right, so we're getting ready to move forward with today. And this afternoon, we know that you are very much inspired by all the speakers that we heard this morning. So going forward, we have nothing less, and we're getting ready to bring on stage another one of our very, very, very qualified speakers for today.
Of course, we continue with the panel, and this particular, of course, well, we have the panel coming up, but before that, we bring forward our friend, Regional President, BP Trinidad and Tobago, Claire Fitzpatrick. We have
That's
some details.
Right. Claire was announced as Regional President, BP Trinidad and Tobago in February 2018. Now, prior to this role, she was appointed Managing Director for BP's exploration and production interests in Australia in September 2014. Now, in this role, she was accountable for all BP upstream activity in Australia, including Northwest Shelf Venture. She also served as a director of the board of Northwest Shelf Gas Limited, the gas marketing agency for this venture. In addition, she was also a board director of the Australian Petroleum Production and Exploration Association and chairperson of the executive committee.
Very distinguished, ladies and gentlemen. Let's welcome Claire Fitzpatrick, Regional President, BP, Trinidad and Tobago.
Now, when I was asked to come and talk today, I did what I suspect many of us do. I looked up who else was speaking, and then I turned to Google. And I look people up, and I see that fellow speakers and panelists have world-class education. They have proven track records of leadership, change management. They have Olympic medals. They have written books. And the next thought I have is, so what am I going to talk about? So I was asked to actually talk about taking risk in your career. So I'm going to talk about various risks as I talk through my career. So at 16, I wanted to fly. I wanted to fly fighter jets. The reason I wanted to do that is I loved the idea of freedom. I loved the idea of being able to soar, to navigate, to be in control, but the thrill. Now, the UK military wouldn't train women as pilots at that point. Now, that was the first time it occurred to me that there was anything in the world I couldn't do because I was a woman. Didn't land very well. But it did start a thought process that I didn't appreciate at the time, which was around, why do I want to do something? What was it about it that appealed to me, motivated me, inspired me? I did go on to get my private pilot's license about 10 years later, a little less complex of a machine than the last one, but it was those very things that made me save my money and actually make sure I got my license. So the why I want to do things has remained with me. My first big kind of career risk and challenge came actually when I graduated. I have a BSc in biological sciences, and it was, what do I do next? I had two choices. I could do a research PhD, and there was a full scholarship available for me, or I could do an applied master's/doctorate in clinical psychology, which is what I was really interested in. And I thought my career plan would be really simple. I would go from there to there, all mapped out. But then I started to think, well, what would that be like? And I realized to do that, I would incur a lot of debt. Mortgages hadn't entered my head at this point, but I didn't like the idea of having a debt that would take me 20 years to pay off. I also could map that career path out. I knew what the grading structure was. I knew what promotion options there were. I knew what the end point was. And I thought, I don't know that I want to know the end point of my career before I've even started it. So I did something a bit more dramatic, and I changed direction. So I started to think about, okay, well, what was it I actually wanted? And I knew I loved to travel, and I thought, I will want to work, so how do I get a professional qualification that would be recognized elsewhere in the world? So with much amusement of my father and much giggles from school teachers I still knew, I decided to become an accountant. But to do that, I had to move to London, because the Scottish Institute wouldn't train someone who didn't have an accounting or finance degree, whereas the English Institute said, if you've got a good enough degree, you've demonstrated academic capability, the rest is down to you and hard work. So I moved to London. None of my classmates moved. None of my friends moved. So I pitch up in London. Edinburgh, at that point, city, 350,000 people. Inner London, 2.1 million. Bit of a change. When I arrived in London, this is how I felt about my career. I didn't actually know which direction I wanted to go in, but I also realized that whichever direction I picked, there seemed to be multiple ways to get there. And if any of you have been in London long enough, you will also realize the dots on the map do not bear any relation to distances on the ground. And it's only by talking to people over time that you realize, you know what, if you want to go from Charing Cross to Embankment, you're far better to get out and walk. And there are certain lines that are considerably more risk associated with them, for very definite reasons, far more prone to delays and breakdowns. But you don't know that at the start. You have to learn to navigate your way through. And you have to then work out which risks you're willing to take as you actually start to work your way through this. Now, at this time in London is when I discovered the oil and gas industry. It wasn't one I knew, and it sounds odd, I know, I fell in love with it. I'd found something that I'd loved about my biological sciences degree, and sciences generally, and things I had been beginning to pick up. And here was an industry which would marry engineering, geology, economics, and politics. And I was hooked. I still am. But I started to look and see who was in roles I liked, who seemed to be having a career path I liked, and what was it they were doing. And one of the things, it's not a requirement, but one of the things I spotted was they've got international experience. So the next challenge for me was, how do I go about getting international experience? Now, the company I was with did an exchange scheme, and they sent about 5 or 6 people to different places in the world. It was about 30 odd of us who applied. They interviewed, the normal sort of process, and I was successful. So I got a role in Houston. Now, this was me moving to a city I had never visited. I packed my suitcases, there was 2 of them, sold my car, and moved. I was with the same employer. Now, for any of you who have any notion about what being an expat is like, this is not it. You knew the deal before you started. You got demoted a grade. You went on to the local salary of that lower grade. There are no allowances, but they did give you a car. Now, if any of you have ever tried to do anything in America where you don't have a driver's license, you don't have a social security number yet, and nor do you have a credit rating, I was very, very thankful they gave me a car. Now, I had fantastic experience there. I learned masses. Like any good organization, yes, that was the grade on a chart, if you like. What would I demonstrate with my work? How was I delivering? I got experience that was way beyond the grade that I was theoretically on, which was great because that meant I then returned to London and was able to carry on. There was one other thing I learned at this stage around taking risk. Not only was I professionally saying, I want that experience and I'll take the downsides to get that. Before I moved to Houston, I'd met a young man. And we'd been seeing each other quite seriously for about 3 months before I got on the plane. I am now married to him, so it obviously did work out okay. But that was a personal risk that I had to make that choice, that I would leave him for the purpose of my career. And quite frankly, it was like, we will see what happens. So returning to London, again, did lots of things. My job has taken me all over the world. I've loved it. But I got to a point of a really hard decision because I realized I was running faster and faster and faster, building lots of good experiences. And I was really focused on the goal, and the goal was become partner. And I suddenly realized I'd lost sight of the why. I couldn't actually say why I wanted to be a partner other than it was there. And I started to reflect on, well, what do I actually want? And I came to the conclusion that what I actually wanted was to be closer to that geology, engineering, economics, and politics. I wanted to be able to be part of running an oil and gas company, not running a company that provided primarily financial services to the oil and gas industry and many others. So I made what at the time I felt was the hardest decision in my life, and that was to move employer. Again, I have all my comfort zone. I'm doing very well. It was time to change. This did feel like diving off the high dive. I knew how to swim in my swimming pool. This was now going into open water. Changing career, I have never regretted, or changing employer, I have never regretted, because it has enabled me to have a very different career. But we all take risks inside the jobs we have. You don't actually have to change job for taking risk, which by definition can work out, and it might not always work the way you expect. So having joined BP, was a company I had never had any dealings with, I had to learn how to navigate in those waters, how to be effective and successful in those waters. And that was also a lot around how I did things as well as what I did. Companies employ you because they assume that you have the skills and experience that you've demonstrated on your resume and in interviews. They expect you to use them. So for me, the challenge was I was in an environment, wasn't the same as an advisor. I had an executive who wanted to do something. The answer was going to be 42. Unfortunately, it wasn't. It was 32. Telling someone who wants the answer 42 that the answer is 32 can be risky, particularly when it's like, no, make it 42. That's when you have to draw on your skills and experience and not only just say, no, it's 32, but explain why it's 32 and why it can't be 42. And if you've got the skills and experience to do that, my experience has been the individual you're talking to, wherever they are in a hierarchy, respects that and will actually then seek you out to validate things in the future of, is this right, is this okay? The other thing you need to do is to be true to yourself and have some courage to speak up. A moment that I can't remember all the details of the issue, but I vividly remember the moment. We had been on a particular path, a decision had been taken, we were going to do X. And in the intervening time, 2 or 3 other external things happened. And I was like, are we sure we still want to do X? And I talked to my boss, and I talked to my boss's boss, and they were like, yeah, we're doing it. It might be right, but nobody could really explain to me how they had evaluated, did these intervening things change the risk of the decision we were about to make. I was in a meeting, about 20-odd people, with the group chief executive. This is not a man I would normally have been having day-to-day dealings with. And it got to the point where he said, does anyone have any questions? Now, my boss and my boss's boss knew that I would say something. I had hoped they would. They sat back. I'm the one left leaning on the table. And it was like, okay, it's now or never. So I said, well, yes, I would just like to confirm, are we sure that this is still the right decision given A, B, and C has happened in the intervening time? Now, he could have shot me down in flames. He didn't. He stopped, he smiled, and he said, that's an extremely relevant question. What are people's thoughts? Suddenly, everyone was willing to explain why it was still the right thing to do. For him, they just hadn't been willing to explain it for me. And at the end of it, he said, okay, I'm comfortable. Claire, are you okay? And I was like, yes. Now I had some context that I hadn't had previously. My knees were shaking when I left that meeting. Things went well. I didn't go into BP thinking I would have an international career. I'd hoped that it would continue to expose me to international experiences. But the next risk for me came when they said, I'd done a couple of roles. We have some international roles for you. There was 2 on offer, and I was like, well, not so much keen on that one. I knew enough about the business in Alaska. I wanted the job in Alaska. This came with an extra little twist. At the point that I had said, yes, I'd like to go to Alaska, the group CFO called me in and said, we'd like you to do the job you're doing for the segment, we'd like you to do at the group. And I'm like, but I want the job in Alaska. Like, yeah, but we'd like you to do the one in the group. Go and think about it. Think about it. Got back to my desk, thought about it. No, I still want to go to Alaska. But thought, politeness, you wait a few days. So then it was sort of, my boss was like, have you thought about it? Yeah, I still want to go to Alaska. Then the upstream CEO calls me in. Claire, you do know we want you to do this job in group. Yes. Well, I was like, I still want to go to Alaska. Now, this was probably on the space of about 2 weeks. It felt like considerably longer, my stress levels up here. There was a cocktail reception. This was at the point that the group CEO was changing. There was a cocktail reception to celebrate the new CEO who had been the upstream CEO. And I'm still thinking, I have no idea where I'm going. Now, let's be honest here. The company has every ability and right to say, it's our decision that the best thing for us is you're doing this job in group. In this cocktail reception, and the CEO just sort of does this, out into the corridor, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to know one way or the other. And he just said to me, get on a plane to Alaska and see if you're going to like it. So I'm like, yes. Now, the picture that you're seeing also shows that there isn't just one bear. It's great that I think I'm going to love this role in Alaska. I do have my husband to think about. How is he going to find it? What's he going to do? So in making the decision that we were going to go to Alaska, he had to take on more risk than I did. We went. I was subsequently told that one of the things that BP was doing was seeing if I would hold my ground, or would I bow to pressure. But I was clear on why I wanted that job and what I was going to get out of it. I could see what BP was going to get out of me doing the group job, but not what I was. So I stuck to my guns, went to Alaska, had a fabulous time, learnt lots. Then I went back to London, a couple of years in London as chief of staff, and then I started to learn my next thing and risk. Australia. I'm in Perth, which is, whichever way the slide is looking, out on its own, dot. The astronauts call it the City of Lights, because it's isolated. 3.5-hour flight to get anywhere. Interestingly, some of the other light dots on the Western Australia are actually the mining sites. If anyone from BHP's here, they're yours. But I learned leadership is lonely. If you're there and you're the most senior person, it's to find a friend. You, obviously, in any organization, you have colleagues, you have networks, and you have to use them. But I really learned how lonely leadership can be when, having taken a strategic decision, it took us a little longer to make than I would have liked, with the group, that was up to me to execute it. Now that involved shutting something down that had been 9 years in the making, 2 years of detailed planning. I had people on the ground, and I had both the state and federal government that really wanted it to go ahead. You're the face of the company. That's your job. That's lonely. So leadership in itself, you're taking a risk because of that, and you have to make sure that you've worked out how you surround yourself by people you can tap into as sounding boards, coaches, even just someone to scream with. And that leads me to here. This in itself was taking a risk. I haven't been a regional president before. I'm responsible for integrating and bottom line delivery and safety for all of our operations here. It's a fantastic role, don't get me wrong, and I'm blessed to have a fantastic team and organization around me, because I don't need to have to know how to do it all. I just need to know that I have people in the organization that know how to do it all. And of that, I'm extremely confident. So I started as a 16-year-old wanting to be a pilot, and I've ended up a few years later looking after BP here in Trinidad. So what I want to do is just leave you with a few things around what I've learnt, some risks to think about, And just a few random thoughts. So lessons. Do what you enjoy. We spend a lot of time in work. Make sure it is something you enjoy. Rarely are we given opportunities, but very often they're there. You just need to have the courage to actually take them. Take risks, but be smart. Take them with your eyes open. I will freely confess there have been things on the way that I didn't anticipate the risk until it materialized. And it's like, oh, wish I'd thought about that bit earlier. But that's learning, that's experience. We all go through that. Risks. You risk being misunderstood. If we're not, just chatting earlier, if you're not explicit about something, then the other person may or may not know what you're actually talking about. I do have a couple of interesting little stories around that, but if people want to know, they can catch me afterwards, of miscommunication, both professionally and personally, can go badly wrong. Learning to collaborate. There used to be, when I started work, knowledge is power. Well, actually, in today's world, collaboration is power. You need to learn how to collaborate with people. I had a wonderful experience of someone, again with hindsight, showing me what that meant. As somebody I worked for taught me, then they coached me, then they collaborated with me, and then they stepped back and let me lead. And it was wonderful to look back and see actually the power of the collaboration in my own development. And the other one is, don't just focus on yourself. We all get caught up in our day jobs. We all get caught up in what we want to do for our careers. It is our job as leaders to make sure that as we're progressing our own career, we're investing in progressing and developing and supporting and pulling through the people coming behind us. Because that's, in itself, is taking a risk on them, and that is part of your job. My thoughts that I think about it, the first one sometimes catches people by surprise. Be your own competition. If I put barriers in my own way, I hold myself back. If you put a barrier in my way, I can work out how to remove it. Develop others, I've touched on. Always be meritocratic. As you end up with networks of people around you, you become very familiar, become very friendly. That's very important. But make sure if you're giving someone a role, giving them an opportunity, you're meritocratic. That doesn't mean you don't take a chance on people, because I wouldn't be here today if people hadn't taken a chance on me. But recognize this is life. We're human. Trials and tribulations. Accept that and don't beat yourself up too much, because that will sometimes take your energy, mind in slightly different directions. Just don't let it derail you. Share with others. What are your concerns? What are your challenges? Does it say the trouble shared is a trouble halved? It's true. But equally, provide that to other people so that you're supporting them as they're taking risks with their career. And with that, I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire, for your amazing story, your journey, walking us through. And of course, we will see you again very soon when you join the rest of the panel as we get into our panel discussion. And after the panel discussion, we'll do another giveaway. But now, myself... just trying to sort things out with the mic. But of course, we get ready for that panel discussion. As we continue, it's called Taking Risk, and we have such an esteemed panel. So we're going to sort it out, right? We have live again in the voice projector. It is alive and well. Check it.
That's right.
Good.
All right, thank you so much, Claire.
Good.
All right, so we're getting ready now to go into our second panel discussion for this afternoon, and I know that you're very excited to hear who we have on the panel.
Of course, our moderator, Rusio Medina Bolivar, Trinidad and Tobago country representative of the Inter-American Development Bank. Ms. Rusio Medina Bolivar is the country representative of the Inter-American Development Bank that was mentioned, the IDB, and Ms. Medina Bolivar manages the private and public sector windows of the IDB group in TNT.
right. She's held several advisory and managerial positions at the IDB over the past 17 years. She also holds a law degree and a Master of Laws as well.
The law degree is from the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú.
We went through this
I
before.
practiced that whole week, you know,
We went
folks.
through this before. Yeah, we've been practicing.
Practiced that whole week. And a Master's of Laws from the Harvard Law School. Great to have you. Our moderator, feel free, join us on stage. Yes? Yes. We move on now to, well, of course, we had Claire earlier on. So Claire will also join us again, back on stage. Yes.
We also have with us Mr. Gervais Warner. He is an executive director of Massey Holdings and the president and group CEO of the Massey Group. Prior to his appointment in 2009, he also served as the executive chairman of the group's energy and industrial gases business unit. Prior to his Massey experience, Mr. Warner was a partner at the international management consulting firm McKinsey & Company, where he spent 11 years serving clients in the U.S., Latin America, and Caribbean across a wide range of industries.
He currently serves on the Trinidad and Tobago Board of Citigroup Merchant Bank Limited, the Arthur Luck-Jack Graduate School of Business, and United Way Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Warner holds an MBA from the Harvard Graduate School of Business Administration. He also holds a BSc degrees in electrical engineering and computer science engineering. And I'm sure in terms of his alma mater, right here in Port of Spain, he's very proud of that, an old St. Mary's boy. Yes, so Gervais, join us on stage. Great to have you with us on the panel.
We also have with us Ms. Hema Ramki-Soon. She currently holds the position of Deputy Head of News at CNC3, the television arm of Guardian Media Group. Hema has been at the group for over 6 years and recently adopted the position of Lead Editor, Broadcast at the media company. Now, this new position allows Hema to be part of the content creation team for both television and radio. Hema has been in media for over a decade and has worked at several of the country's leading media houses. And when she joined the GML Group 6 years ago, she accepted the position of lead host of the station's breakfast show, The Morning Brew, a position that she still holds today. Hema sees herself as a conversationalist, and she uses her voice and the media platform to not just raise awareness on national issues, but she chooses to highlight and share stories that foster hope and ignite social change.
Hema, straight from the screen to our stage. Hema's joining us for the conference. Great to have you. Yes. And finally, Anya Ayongche. Of course, she has taken the fashion and design beyond our Caribbean shores, a graduate of the Parsons School of Business and the St. Martin's School of Art and Design. Anya began her journey in New York City as a graphic designer and returned to Trinidad in 2007. Anya designed her first collection in 2009 for her label Pilar, and in 2010 launched the lingerie line Anya the Rogue, the first of its kind in the Caribbean. Of course, combining entrepreneurship with her love for design, Anya has explored various avenues to integrate her love for fashion and design. Of course, having achieved success in the 9th season of the popular U.S. television show Project Runway, where she was the winner, Anya has continued to, bring forward her amazing style and passion. She has recently launched her e-commerce platform. It's called Carnival, where you can, of course, get your Monday wear. Monday wear is a big thing now in the carnival. By all means, she is fully dedicated and empowered as a woman and fully believes that entrepreneurship and financial freedom are key. Anya's drive to succeed is rooted in her personal need to achieve her best in any endeavor and the desire to continuously learn, grow, improve, and reach new heights within herself. Let's welcome designer, and I could safely say my good friend, Anya Ayongche, to the panel.
Ladies and gentlemen, we get ready now for our second panel discussion for this afternoon. Welcome to the panel.
Take it away.
Nope, not yet.
Hello? Good afternoon? No? Not yet? Now, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon. And
definitely it's a pleasure to be here in the conference, and thank AMCHAM for the opportunity to be here in moderating this session about taking risk, which is a STEAM panel. For me, as a part of the head of the IDB group here in Trinidad and Tobago, and IDB group is definitely committed 100% for gender equality, is our actually slogan and campaign. Strongly in order to actually how we can mainstream gender in not only for our public sector but our private sector in general, not only as a corporation but also in our work that we do in the Latin America and the Caribbean. So I'm very proud to be here moderating this session. Maybe just to put a little context in terms of a little data in terms of the challenges that women is facing in leaderships. And the International Labour Organization 2013 ran a study, and it says that in the Caribbean, the three top challenges that women face are related to gender in society, so what's the role that is assigned for women and men in society, the lack of flexible time, and actually that was mentioned in the first panel, I mean in terms of work arrangements, and also the male culture in the corporate world. That differs a little bit from Latin America, but it's very, very similar. I think in Latin America we have, and top one is that woman has more responsibilities in the family than compared to the Caribbean. But that's the really three challenges. And a more recent study done in 2019, is very recent, by KMG, actually tried also to see what are actually the main things that are key for success for women in workplace, and they mentioned the 3 R's, which are risk, that is very related to this, resilience, and reward. So with this context, I will maybe start with the panel and try to see what are the opinion in terms of how you see the thoughts about women taking risk in Trinidad and Tobago. So I don't know, maybe Anya, you can tell us your opinion about that.
Can you just say one more time, how?
How a woman takes risk-taking here in Trinidad and Tobago, based on the context.
Oh my goodness, well, in my context, because I'm an entrepreneur, not in the corporate world, I see many people, especially in the creative entrepreneurship world that I'm in, taking risk by starting their own companies, by doing that while having children, while a lot of times being single mothers. And I think that day to day, that it's a risk-taking world that they live in, that we all live in. And that's, as I said, that's my context. So I think probably, somebody who's more in a corporate environment could speak to how that happens within an organization. But in Trinidad and Tobago, I always consider it sort of matriarchal in the sense that most homes are run by the mothers. The finances are run by the mothers and the wives, and I think that within itself is a very risk-taking position to have, and often not with the type of accolade that it deserves. And I think that having such somewhat thankless lives is part of the risk that people take.
Okay, maybe Jervis, you can have an opinion. They talk about the corporate and also the male position.
Well, as you know, I am a man, right?
Yeah.
But I think women take risks every day. And, we do have a society, like many, in which women have this role of running a household. And every day, women who come to work at our group of companies have to juggle this, getting kids ready for school, making sure there's dinner at home, and then coming to work to function. And there's this competition for time and attention and for dedication. And I think that every day women struggle with the risk of, if I spend too much time at work, I'm losing out on something at home. And vice versa, if I compromise and leave work too early because my kid is sick, or I get in late because, someone had a problem at home, then, at work they may think I'm not working hard enough. So to me, it occurs like almost every day, women are struggling with this risk of this dual responsibility that they have, and I think that's the challenge for us as organizations and employers. How do we create an environment that, allows women to actually not experience that as such a conflict?
Okay, great. Before continuing, I think just to remind the audience about Slido, I think still we have the questions from the previous one on the screen. So please, if you have questions, put it there so we can include it also in the panel. So in terms of taking risk, I mean, and I was mentioning in terms of the, and you mentioned in terms we talk about the culture of a male-dominated culture. And Claire, I mean, in the industry that, I mean, you work, I mean, that's happening. And how, I mean, you were explaining in your presentation all the taking risk of how you can say your experience in terms of laddering and in climbing the ladder in terms of your professional vis-a-vis this context of a male culture.
I think there are many industries are male-dominated. My hope is that will change over time, but it will only change over time if inside a company we recognize that there is more than one, I'm going to say, kind of model of this is what an employee looks like, whether that looks like in terms of male-female, but also in terms of what else is on in their life. We're all human beings. We're not purely functioning in work, and create an environment that, going back to your point, Gervais, is actually output-driven as opposed to clocking in and clocking out. Create the flexibility, particularly if it's around children, but equally, I'm increasingly aware of elderly parents and what are the care needs of them. Organizations have to adapt to allow some of what are viewed as risks, and quite frankly are risks people are taking, to make that less of a risk, and it's okay to be able to balance those things. But a corporate can put all the things in place imaginable. It requires a mindset change of the employees, because if I want to leave to go and attend to something I need to in my personal life, and my boss is like,
doesn't show.
The policies can say what they like. So it is around, and that's actually a role not only for women in the workplace, that's actually a huge role for men in the workplace. And equally, I know what experience I have had in one location where a man who worked for me approached me very early on and said, look, I'm a really hands-on dad, and I have 3 children under 7. It's really important that I'm there for bath time, putting them to bed. And I'm like, if I want something at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I really don't mind when between 3 o'clock that afternoon and 1 minute to 10 the following morning it appears. But it requires people to be willing to step into that space. But companies do need to put policies in place that actually gives women something to at least look to know actually this is meant to be possible. And that's, in doing that, again, everyone's home life is the same, but I sincerely hope that you do your fair share of stuff at home, Gervais.
Yes. Hands-on dad, particularly with homework.
So a culture of maybe results, outputs, more arrangement that can actually push that agenda.
Yeah, allows gives someone the flexibility. Now that doesn't work for every role. I appreciate that, particularly in my industry. If you're working offshore, getting some degree of flexibility is a little more challenged. But that doesn't mean there shouldn't be the opportunity for that dialogue, particularly as I'm interested in getting more women offshore. How do I create that environment that they enjoy being there, they're learning, but equally structured something that actually then allows them the home life that they still need.
Great. I don't know if from Slido we have 114. Maybe we can, before going, then maybe more people can vote. But Heba? Maybe just, moving ahead in terms of also the experience. If you can tell us, one case that you remember that you have to take a risk that push you outside of your comfort zone, and what do you feel was the lesson learned, and it was a positive outcome, and also maybe another one that it was maybe not so positive.
I thought about risk-taking for quite a while since I've been asked to sit on this panel. Initially, when I got invited, I thought it was a misprint because I saw these amazing people on this panel, and I thought, okay, that in itself is a risk, being able to hold your own among such amazing people. So thank you, first of all. It's interesting as a woman in an organization where you have so many females, but yet the higher up you go in many media organizations in a corporate element, the dynamic changes quite a lot. If you ask me about my career, I didn't go actively seeking leadership. Leadership somehow just found me. And I remember when I first returned to CNC3, I came back as the host of the Morning Brew and the executive producer.
And then I started my MBA, and I started to have more time, and I then wanted to make a difference. And I think that why came to be part of my conversation. I wanted to make a greater difference in creating an environment for women to be more comfortable, for my voice to be heard. If you look at the way that we are, women by nature, and I can only speak for myself, so let me not generalize it, I think we strive for perfection. We're socialized in this country to believe that we must perfectly fit the role of mother, corporate wife. What we're striving for is perfection. So when you talk about risk takers, it's not a fear of taking a risk. It's a fear of failure. It's a fear that we have put this set agenda, and we don't see failure as a learning experience, but we see it as a fatal blow. We see it as a shaming concept. We see it as something that will forever mark or be a line in our defining story for the rest of our lives. And when I look at myself, even when I took on the position, I was giving Mr. Warner this story, changing the role from executive producer to deputy head of news and then to lead editor for content. I remember when I did the interview for lead editor, I thought I flunked the interview. I came back up to my office and cried uncontrollably. And I work in a news organization, so nothing is ever secret. So everyone in the office knew that Hema was in her office crying. She just failed this interview. And I remember thinking that I have just failed. I have just embarrassed myself. I'm going to leave CNC3. And this happened just a couple of months ago. And my boss at the time, still is my boss, Julian Rogers, came to me in the afternoon after the 7 o'clock news because I was too ashamed to leave the office at 1 o'clock because everyone knows I was crying down the place. And he said to me at 8:30, he said, "Why are you so afraid? What do you think this new title means to your job?" And I sat and I thought about it, and it means absolutely nothing different because I've been doing the job for the last year. And it only, because now a title is now attached to it, I was afraid of failure. And I want to create an environment where women see not this, one, they demand their worth, because I did not demand my worth. I don't know if my bosses will say that now. But we're not afraid of failure. We're not afraid to step up, and that we create the environment for women to think it's okay to step up. And even if you don't get that position, we're going to create something else for us all to have a place to move up. Because the higher up you move, I am the only person that sits in a meeting sometimes with all men. And that I hope to change one day.
Okay, great. I mean, definitely. Oh, a big applause. And I think definitely, I guess, is this context of be afraid to fail. No, I mean, I think is this how you can create this context, and also the employees, the supervisor can create this ability. Okay, it's okay to fail, and you can move ahead. And it's, I think, in general, I think that is very important to actually move in the career and develop it as a leader, because you don't if you're afraid to take risk and fail, you will never will be learning. So that's definitely very important as a takeaway. Maybe we can go to the slide, though. I think it's one question that it says, in a room full of men with very strong opinions and combative natures, what are some ways do you suggest getting your opinions and ideas across effectively? I don't know who wants to take.
You can say two of us have got experience of that. And I'll go first, and I'd love you to add your perspectives in. Confidence and techniques. And the way I start with confidence on, if you're not confident enough in your own skill and ability, and that you have something of value to add, it'll be very difficult for any of the other techniques to help. And there are techniques around using your body, whether it's leaning forward. Very effective thing is, if everyone else is sitting, stand up and go and get a glass of water, because everyone stops and looks. It gives you the option of a break in a conversation to then get your point in. And that's just one or two. There's lots of tips and things out there that help. And then you actually then have to get your point into that particular thing. But that's up to you. But my assumption is, if you're in the room, you're there because you are viewed as having value to contribute to the room. Go for it. But you will have lots of experiences.
You know, it's funny, body language is an interesting thing. And I only learned very late in my career the importance of taking your standing, making a presentation, have your PowerPoint, and very trivial, but it's so true. Have your power pose, know your subject inside out. And if you feel that you're outnumbered, as a female, what I do, if there's another female in the room, they're like my echo. So someone else is going to say, that was a good idea, Hema. And somehow it shifts the power dynamic. If you're in a room and you feel you're in a combative situation, sometimes going at something head on is not the best, particularly if your voice is not going to be as robust as the other player. So ask a question. Say, well, I hear you and I appreciate that. What do you think about this idea? And make them feel as though it's their idea. I mean, that works brilliantly all the time. And we can always, if I am not a witty person, the rundown can prove that, but make a joke. If you have a sense of humor and you sometimes feel as though you want to diffuse conflict, step back, make a joke, but always make sure that you're not afraid to speak up. And I learned that also pretty late in my career. Even if you fail, even if everyone else doesn't listen, even if they don't agree, you're true to yourself and you're true to your why. And your why is probably the most important thing that you exist for.
No, absolutely the same. I think that my context of this is often pitching an idea to a room of investors or not always in a boardroom, but a similar setting where I get to, and I'm in fashion. So there's a sort of double layers of not often having the type of context to have a conversation with a more masculine audience. But I always try to find the commonalities in whatever it is that I'm pitching to the audience that's receiving it. And sometimes that requires being a little bit empathetic and putting myself in the shoes of the people who are hearing me. And also I think it's really being as aware of what it is that you are selling, in my case, knowing and having the confidence that whatever that is worth sharing, even if it does not receive the kind of reciprocity that you hope for. And each one of those conversations, I learn something. Even if it's combative, I receive feedback, even if it's negative. It helps me to move forward, it helps me to grow, it helps me to hone my idea in the case that I'm talking about. And I grew up in a house of 5 brothers and my dad so I have a lot of experience having to prove my point. And persistence, I think, is part of it. Sometimes the pushback is an opportunity to really be more confident about what I'm trying to sell or what I'm trying to pitch. And being too easily dissuaded, I lose the opportunity to move forward.
Rosie, I have from male perspective, just a small suggestion. It might sound strange, but in my experience, authenticity is amazing.
Yeah.
So if you're in this experience that you're being dominated and you can't speak, you could actually just say, excuse me, I actually feel like I can't speak. I feel like I can't get a word in edgewise here. And it's like the pin that drops and everybody stops. And you suddenly have the opportunity to be heard because it's likely to be very true. And, hopefully it's not a really, really awful group of men, but a decent group of men who have some kind of chivalry will respect that a lady has said that, I'm having a hard time just speaking it. And that's just something to try on.
Take that risk.
Take that risk a bit, but it's authentic. You're not saying something that isn't true, and the authenticity of it just is resounding.
No, and I think authenticity, and also as it was mentioned, if you are definitely in a room as an expert in a topic, definitely maybe you will know more than your audience over there. So you have to show that point, and don't be brave to do that. No, even though it's not maybe a friendly environment or context. Before actually was one question. We passed it, but I think it was also as a lesson learned in the negative side. You took the risk, you went out to your comfort zone, but you failed. No, and how you actually managed to move ahead. So I don't know if you have any views or Claire, Gemma, I don't know.
Taking a risk every day when I decide to go out, or my team goes out, because I'm just a face, but it's a huge team of people that will create the content of CNC3. Whenever we put a news item out, or we put an opinion out, or we put an op-ed out, there's a risk. There's a risk the public will fire back at it. There's a risk that it may not be 100% accurate while we strive to ensure that it's 100% accurate. Every single time you stand up for something or take a position on something, it's a risk. Recently, we decided to make some internal changes and took a gamble that didn't really pay off, and that just resulted in staff morale not being where it wanted to be, and we all thought it was such a great idea that we could do this. In the end, it's just a learning experience. In the end, you have to learn. Sometimes you just have to be quiet and see the way the temperature has fallen and learn from people, have conversations with people, understand why people are hurt, understand why they felt left out from a decision. And in our case, it's also with the news agenda. Every time I go out in the morning, I run the risk of a campaign starting the next day. But I learned to just chalk it up to experience and go on the next day, because I think all you can do in life is it's a continual learning process. Learn from your mistakes, do it the next day. You have the opportunity to correct the mistake. And once you know it didn't turn out the way that you should, someone feels left behind, someone feels hurt, or you did not get the result you anticipated, then understand that something went wrong and you must learn from it.
Great. Maybe we have a question in Slido. It says, unfortunately, women seems to be each other's biggest critics in the organization. How do we teach each other to work together without pulling down each other?
It's something I've heard. And
Not personal experience.
I was going to say, if people have been my biggest critic, if they've been other women, then I've been blissfully unaware of it. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened. But equally, one of the things which I've observed is, as you were talking about, sort of, the further up you go in an organisation, the demographics of male-female tends to shift. There was one point in my career when I became aware of that shift, and I was thinking, what's different here? And it was a point that I realised I was the most senior woman. And until that point, I had always either had women around me, I was working for a woman, or I was working for a man who was very meritocratic and really good at feedback. And it was just that, sort of different. And then realising, actually, my job as a leader is to bring through people behind me. Not men, not women, people. And I think it's, all women I should feel like that. So it's back to my thing of the competition is yourself, not someone else. And I think more people need to get into that. But I do know, I have a friend who, love her to pieces, she cannot work for a woman. It's one of the, you start to see the trend, and I call her on this one. She now works for herself. On the basis of I'll be spotting the theme here as you've moved employers several times, and kind of what was the constant thing. And for her, it is just she cannot see another woman without thinking competition, and I have no idea why. If there's any psychologists in the room, I'm sure you'll have a field day. But that's shame on us as women if that's our attitude.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, it's my personal view. I don't know what others are.
Yeah, same. I mean, I feel blessed as well to have not necessarily personally felt that. I'm sure I may be also blissfully unaware. But I think in being as an entrepreneur, one of the things that we have the opportunity to do is create our culture. So whether we have a team of 5 people or 10 or 50 or whatever it is, we have the space in which to make the types of decisions that disallow any of that unfair competition or critique that is unnecessarily negative. And I think part of it is to actually stop saying this, in my opinion. I haven't really experienced it. I'm sure that people have, but consistently harping on it is not taking us anywhere forward. And I think that maybe having more conversations about the examples of collaboration, the examples in which the opposite happens, is more beneficial to moving forward than consistently sort of emphasizing that even if it happens, it's becoming less and less the case, or we have opportunities to tell another story.
And I want to endorse what Anya said, because I have not experienced it. Maybe we're just really 3 lucky women up here. I'm sure that
I haven't experienced it.
But I learned very early on, it's not a bad woman, it's a bad person. And I should not allow that one experience to make this entire broad brush statements about it, because I have been extremely blessed and lucky. I think very late in my career, I can appreciate mentorship. And I have 3 or 4 very strong, amazing women that I lean on and learn from them. And I think as women, as the higher up you get, you do have the opportunity and you do have an obligation to ensure that you create a culture where you mentor, you nurture, and you guide other women to not only aim for more, dream bigger, but achieve their dreams. And I have been lucky to find that, and I hope I can do that for other women as well.
Okay. Maybe
By the way, men do that too. Men do that too. Pull each other down. Competitive nature.
So it's not gender bias.
No.
But I think it's just that sometimes, and I see it also for colleagues, or sometimes in experience in my career, in terms of, the tendency is sometimes to be tougher, maybe more sometimes tougher with women. But I think that tendency has been changes, and I think, as Anya says, the world is changing. More women has more opportunities, and they're climbing the ladder in terms of their careers. So that is dissipating. So we have to maybe start thinking and be focusing more on the positives instead of just the negatives and the collaborations, because otherwise we will not have definitely a positive outcome. And maybe just to take an advantage that you were, Jeremy, talking about, in the businesses and entrepreneurship, how a corporation, a company, maybe from your own experience in the massive groups, how can it can be businesses can maximize the leadership of potential women and avoid having these restraints of taking risk? How you can move that agenda?
It's a good question, because I don't think we do it very well right now. So I think that for me personally, and I think for our group of companies, we're coming to, I think, a point of realization that to do this well, you really have to take a concerted effort to do it. So our reflections are, we have the same kind of statistics that you were just referring to here. Most of the graduates coming out of university are women. And so we have lots of women who come into our organization. But as you move through supervisor, manager to, executive to senior executive, the ranks of the women, thin. And my experience being what they call an African American in the United States was, as a minority, when I worked for a progressive company, they actually had programs in place to identify promising minorities and help them feel like they could be at home in environments which could otherwise be kind of foreign, to provide the mentorship that others were getting naturally because, they would just associate with people who were more like them. So I think that organizations like ours have to do more in a really concerted effort. I'm sure the BP is much better at this than we are as an advanced organization, but really having programs of, and not just women mentoring women, but men mentoring women, identifying, high potential candidates that you can bring through and seriously try to populate, and to Claire's point, not on a basis of just representation, but on a basis of meritocracy. But sometimes we don't actually help women develop to their best potential in our organization, and that's our loss. So it's a tough question for me, because there's a bit of a self-realization of a gap we have. But what I could say is that in the realization of a gap, once you see the gap, you cannot not see the gap again. It's our big opportunity to take that on in a much more concerted way, and I'm sure in the next few years you'll see the results of that.
Definitely awareness, how to move ahead the agenda definitely is a great start, and that's the way we have to, to see, to close the gap. That's the only way to do it. I don't know if, Claire, you have...
I think build a bit of, there's a gap. I like the phrase, once you see the gap, you can't unsee it. It's there, and you can't deny it. But you actually have to plan and be much more considered about how you actually want to then close the gap. And I'm a firm believer in meritocratic approaches to putting people through, but it's actually challenging. What is the succession plan or the feeder pool for any of the roles? And actually challenging, why is there not a woman on that?
Yeah.
Do we have blinders on, or have we not actually then got the right level of development to have the broad candidate slate? But it's also taking a little bit of a risk on someone. And that is, I do hear and have experience of, I'm not going to apply for that.
Right.
Belief, perception, whatever, on encouraging, and that takes some proactivity on like, no, actually, really think you'd be good. Including, yep, you may not get the job, but you're going to get exposure through the interview process, that people will get to know more about you. And that in itself can then help the visibility, the awareness, the opportunity. But it requires effort and it requires a plan, because the gap will stay the gap if we just say, yep, it's a gap.
Great. And Anya, I mean, you are an entrepreneur, and definitely you moved from your comfort zone. How you knew, or how you managed to know when is the right time to actually take the chances and to move the leap?
Well, in thinking about this panel, it occurred to me that after taking the chance to apply for Project Runway, where I had absolutely no rights and no place to, I didn't know how to sew, and the primary part of the whole show is that you have to sew to even be in it. And my husband actually is a life coach, and it has really benefited me throughout all of this process to have someone like that to sort of guide me out of my fear, to know actually that my fear is my compass, and to when I'm afraid of something, that's the direction in which I actually want to go. And I've learned past Project Runway that through the fear, on the other side of that, if I feel joy, then I've made the right choice. I've taken the right risk. And the risk-taking is a skill like any other to continue to hone. That it's not that you take a risk and then you hold back and you think, okay, I took a big risk, I won Project Runway, fantastic, I'm just going to coast for the rest of my life, It's actually become, in itself, an activity. What's the next risk? How much bigger can I grow? How much more does this sort of pool of experience expand? And I think that it's not about even knowing when, it's just continuously doing it and grasping the opportunities, and making the effort to find them, and being willing to hone that skill as any other skill. Spiritual practice, exercise, education, it's not going to just happen. Being good at taking risk means doing it all the time.
And I guess in that way you can actually build the self-confidence to move ahead and be more assertive in the surroundings. Maybe we can take the next one, I guess, in the Slido. How can women balance the scale with respect to the salary and the compensation, as men are often paid higher than women? I don't know who wants to take that one.
I'll take that one. This question came up yesterday. There's enough data out there. Again, I was going to say there's a gap. There's enough data out there that's the evidence that says that there are, I'm not even going to use the word examples, there are situations where you do have men and women doing the same job, same level of experience, same level of competence, and they are on different salaries. The question is, there's a gap, what are we going to do about it? We actually then need to do something about it. I can't speak for any other organization, I can only speak from my own. We do data analytics on looking for, is there an unconscious bias in that? Now, we've been doing it a long time. We are now, by law in the UK, required to publish that. Now, some of that, the legal aspect of it doesn't take in the subtlety of, I got promoted, I'm one of 12 regional presidents around the world. I've been in the job 9 months. My colleague in North Africa has been in the job 12 years. I'm going to make a wild guess that we're probably not on the same salary. And that's okay. That doesn't necessarily come out in what we publish, but we do actually run data analytics to identify that and correct it where it has then been picked up. I shared with the team at BP, a group of us, senior women, were at a meeting in London, and we asked for a meeting with our group head of reward. And our group CFO joined it, and I'm not sure whether that was so that the poor man didn't feel completely outnumbered, but I think he was just like, what's on your mind? Help me understand. And we just pushed on, why do we only run a sample? With the ability of data analytics today, why are we not running data analytics on the 100% of the population? And for the stuff that then gets kicked out, fine, it needs humans to then see is that reasonable or not. Easy to say, harder to do, I realize, but I would encourage all organizations to think of that, because I can, hand on heart, say we have identified examples where there was a mismatch, and I can very definitely attest to that personally. I can't decide whether it was huge honesty or huge stupidity on the person, often the person who was my boss at the time, who said, "You're good, Claire, you're not that good to warrant that much of a pay rise. We picked up a discrepancy." So it does exist, but that's up to companies to actively do something about that.
I want to say also on an individual level to all of, and I don't want to keep making it a woman's issue, to know your worth, but also do some research. Find the market data out there. Know what the comparable rates are, because oftentimes I have never negotiated in a salary negotiation. Every time I get a contract, I take it and sign it, and that's really sad. Don't do that. But I think we have to start embracing and standing up and doing the data analytics. Don't depend on people to do it for us. If enough of us stand up, then we're going to change that culture, and eventually the gap will get smaller because the data is out there. Pick up the phone, call a friend, go to an organization, a business organization, find out and document, journal things. Understand that your market value is a lot more than you think it is. And if enough of us do it at the same time, that gender gap will get smaller and smaller, and eventually we will have the equality and equity that we want.
I think it's in terms of how we gather is that analytics. Data can help us actually to discover these gaps and actually how we can plan and do an action plan to move ahead. But if you don't start looking what is going on in your context, you will never fix it like it. So, and data and the good transparency. In the IDB group, and also we went through a similar process in terms of the data analytics, and actually we reach now in terms of salary, in terms of women, we are equal. And actually we just, the President Moreno just presented recently about that achievement. So, but it still is a constant movement of in towards the analyze, and in the recruitment process, how you actually you acknowledge that specific theme. I think we don't have Slido anymore.
So I'll just add for those without data, don't be afraid to ask. Because sometimes that's the biggest missing ingredient. Men ask all the time. They're very pushy about salary. Seriously. And if it's indeed true, and there's a risk of your company losing you, chances are you may not get that number, but you'll get a movement. And if not, the worst thing will happen is they said no. You didn't lose anything.
Yeah, and I mean, my contacts, pitching to investors, asking for fundraising. Always I'm surprised by how much more I could ask for. And when I do ask for more, I'm always surprised at the response. And equally, I mean, you're never going to get the $100,000 or the $1 million if you ask for 10. So I've really learned that in the process of growing businesses and learning that all you can do is ask. There's absolutely no harm, and you never have much to lose other than having a conversation about why you're not ready, which is also a benefit in my opinion.
And it's true, actually, the survey that I was mentioned before from the U.S. market that ran the KPMG says that women are less inclined for asking a salary increase versus a man. I mean, they can ask for more projects, more tasks, but not necessarily a salary, which doesn't mean that they don't care about the salary increase, which is the idea, because it's not that they don't want it. So that's kind of a reality that we be more conscious about it, and how we can actually, again, take the risk to do and make the questions. Maybe in the last sections, I mean, of the panel, I maybe just want to highlight, and it was mentioned, Claire, in your presentations and early in the morning and today, about the importance of mentor coaching and finalists. So I would like your opinion about an experience, maybe personal, about how you see the mentor, the advantage, the learning, be a mentor or be a mentee, getting back as well, how you, maybe with young generations as well. So I would love to hear your opinion and your thoughts about that.
Well, I think being a mentor and being a mentee is a great thing. And I think people are able to be both at much earlier stages in their career than they probably realize. The other thing which I currently benefit from is mutual mentoring, where it doesn't it's actually someone who isn't in BP, but is in a corporate environment, on being able to test things with each other and help each other out. But over the years, I have had both mentors and mentees. I think it's hugely valuable because, for me, if it's nothing to do with your line, it's somebody who is outside, so it's safe, and then they push you. That's the whole point of a mentor, is kind of, why are you not taking the risk? Why aren't you asking for more money when you're pitching it? And just the questions, you probably know yourself, but you don't push yourself into that space. I think the mentoring has an enormous, for men and women, but particularly I think for women, on the courage to go that extra step. And I think we don't look widely enough from where in our lives mentors could come from, or where we could effectively help and support someone else. I don't know other people's
100%.
experiences.
I mean, I wouldn't have had the career I have had, or I've had, without tons of fantastic. I mean, I've been blessed. Everywhere I've been, I've actually been able to be, wonderfully mentored by all sorts of different people, men, women, all sorts of races, creeds, in business, outside of business, personal coaches. So it has been of huge value to me, and I try to do my best to extend that. And I think that the more you can be systematic, I mean, if there's one word of advice for everybody in the room, is make sure you have at least one mentor. But the more you have, the merrier you will be. But mentorship is a really, really important thing to seek out.
It is, and I can't underscore the importance of that. I gave you my personal story very late in my career, but I have met amazing people, and you learn. Sometimes it's not even a formalized relationship. It's just people that you can call upon, people who have walked the path before you have been there, people you can learn from, and just figure it out. They will guide you. They will see things in you that you may not necessarily see, and speak up. I think if I have to give one piece of advice to everyone here, it would be to always be true to yourself and speak up. If you see something, if you want something, ask for it. Don't be afraid to demand your worth. Don't be afraid to let your voice be heard.
Yeah, I think for me, having both mentorship and coaching, which I think we're both sort of blending in this conversation, is important because, in my experience, my mentor, who is Mei-Ling, who's been my mentor from the beginning of my fashion career, has guided me in ways that I can't even quantify. Yet, having a coach has shown me the areas in which I wouldn't stretch. But to them, it's obvious. Like, you're setting your bar here, your bar is here. And you have no excuse to not match that. So, my husband, again, as a coach, he says, one of the things you may want to avoid when you're trying to take a risk is asking your friends and family for advice. Because they're always going to want you to be safe. They're always going to not generalizing, but most of the time, the people around you in your life, and sometimes this includes your mentor, may want to protect you. But having a coach or having someone who you know is looking out for your ability to stretch is really, really key. Because like having a trainer in the gym, most of the time you're not going to do the 15 reps, but if the trainer's there, you're going to do all 15. If not, you might do 20. So it's just that extra push that I think, in the context of risk-taking, I really, really value the opportunity to have someone who you invest in yourself. You find a way to make sure that you're looking at the ways in which you can go as far as you can.
Definitely, I mean, the idea to have a safe net, a network, coaching, mentors, allies, friends, that definitely help you to move ahead in the agenda. I guess we're running out of time, but I don't know any final comments, but definitely I would like to a round of applause for the panel.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
I guess.
Yes, of course, I want to thank Rusio and the entire panel for assisting us and for sharing their stories and being so amazing with us this afternoon as we dealt there with risk-taking. Let me invite some of our colleagues from, if anyone from Unicoma can join me, because I actually brought the bowl up. I'll probably let Rusio do the first one for me, and while we wait for our rep from Unicoma, just pull something for me, all right? I believe we actually have, where is table 18? Can I engage table 18? Table 18, right? Let me come across by table 18. So I'm going to ask a question. I need just one person to answer. So you all could figure out from now, ladies, who will be the spokesperson on the table. No prompting, or probably, if you need any details, you could probably ask one person, a person to, well, you all have nobody to your left, so it will have to be probably a right. Who's gonna answer? Easy question. This is from Ashley. Home store voucher. Yes, proper thing. Now, it was mentioned earlier. Now, ladies, no assistance with the with the answer. You all should figure this one out. The minister earlier on mentioned ladies who were very instrumental in the carnival. We just came out of the carnival season. I want you to tell me which artists back in the 70s, after their contribution, forced the hands of the Calypso competition, the March Gras as we know it, to change its name from the Calypso King to the Calypso Monarch competition. Who was the person that broke down that particular barrier? So hold on, I think we have an answer here. Hold on now. Say the answer to the mic.
Was it Calypso Rose?
No, it's Calypso Rose, correct is right. And that year was 1978 when she won the crown. Now, Calypso Rose is from where?
She is originally from Grenada.
No. Oh, Tobago.
Tobago?
All right. Calypso, no, that's Sparrow, darling. That's Sparrow from Grenada. Rose from Tobago. And the final question, because this voucher is almost yours, she is indeed from Tobago. Can you give me the light pole number for Rose's accommodation there in Tobago? Well, I don't even know. You hold on to this, darling. Congratulations. So that's an answer right there. We good to go? Right? And it's indeed because when that was mentioned earlier, I thought of Rose. And actually I saw Rose a couple of weeks ago when she came forward for the March Gras show. And let me tell you, real icon. That's a national treasure. A national treasure. Anyone from Unicoma here with us? If not, I'll ask. Unicoma? All right, fantastic. I'll let you pull one more. And we have another giveaway. Right. Let's see what we have here. Table 14. Right. All right, table 14. Let me get the voucher. And after this quick giveaway, we have the final piece. I know that Shala will take care of the needful. So I actually have some information here on another pioneer, a leading woman. I'm going to give the bio and you just tell me the person's name. So listen up closely. Who's going to go for this one? Yeah? Right. Well, I'll take my phone money, come out, just Lord of mercy. All right, so let me get the information here. So I'm going to give the information. You tell me who this person is, right? An American media executive, actress, talk show host, no hints, huh? Television producer, of course known for her talk show, which had the highest rated television program in history during its syndication from 1986 to 2011. Are you sure? What's your answer?
Oprah Winfrey.
It is Oprah Winfrey, man. She did well. She did well. Another powerful woman in media. Good stuff. I'll take up my 20s here, right? Yeah, I'll take that up. Shala, talk to us. We had some giveaways, compliments the home store, so the ladies are good to go. Again, well done. And I want to thank again all those on the last panel for really sharing their story. Hema, Anya, the full team, Gervais, of course, you did well to negotiate and to handle it there, just like Stephen earlier on. Seriously, let me give you my mic. It's all yours.
All right. Why is my mic? I feel you do something to the mic every single time, you know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our final speaker for this afternoon as we move into the interactive Career Catapult workshop with a very, very, very famous author. Her name is Rupa Unikrishnan. And I'm holding a book up here right now, which is where I'm going to be reading a short bio from Rupa. And this is available for sale right now. $150. It's outside. It's worth a read. We've been catching up on some of the content so far, and it's been really, really good. Now, she spent 2 decades in roles where she has driven change and innovation in several Fortune 500 companies. She is a former vice president of corporate strategy and global head of worldwide talent at Pfizer, with previous positions at BlackRock and Citibank. A master coach, Unikrishnan now works with senior executives and with companies to improve their strategic planning and idea development. She is a Rhodes Scholar with a Master of Philosophy degree and an MBA from the University of Oxford. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Miss Rupi Unikrishnan.
It's such a pleasure to be here, and what a fabulous audience. Love the colors and also love the bios I've been listening to. My gosh, you've had some amazing speakers today. Congratulations, Patricia, on putting this great event together. So that's my book, and I think some of you will see it in front over there. I'd like to tell you a little bit about why this book came about, and then I think you'll have some context of why we're talking about this in balance. There's an element of risk-taking. There's a lot about innovation in here. By the way, Claire, I was 18 when I decided I want to be a jet fighter. Turned out that was the year that India decided women could be in the army. I sent in my applications. They told me I was too short. Which is, interestingly, it's a structural issue, right? You think, okay, I'm actually the average height of an Indian woman. So the fact that they had decided to open up this service to women, but then weren't going to take an average Indian woman, that's a lot of what we face, right, in our careers. So I will one day go back to the Indian Army and talk to them about this. So to give you a context about the book and how it came about, so I think you heard I'd held strategy roles in a series of companies at Pfizer, at Citibank, and I was starting to feel like one of the things that I wanted to do was to actually get back into consulting, which is my first love. So that's how I landed up setting up my own consulting practice. And in that practice, what I would do is I would often go in and we would write, big strategy papers, think through what is the future of an industry. And then I would land up having these conversations with senior executives where they'd say, and now if we're going to make this big change, what about me? What's this going to do to my career? And so what would start as a strategy session would land up with me, sort of both of us with a glass of wine, thinking through the other person's career. And I realized I was doing this without a license in the sense that I wasn't a coach, so I went off and became a master coach. And so I felt like, okay, you don't drive without a license. You better not, coach somebody without a license. So some of this comes from having done this 30, 40 times, I realized there were a series of patterns emerging. And those patterns were that I was using my strategy hat and helping people with real-life career issues and goals. I was basically taking strategy tools and using that, innovation tools, and using that on people. And so I started writing this down in my blog, and that became, I got a call from a publisher who said, I've been reading your blog. You need to make this into a book. And I said, go ahead, have at it. By the way, earlier this week, I was telling Claire and the table, I opened up my post, and the Career Catapult has been doing nicely, but I opened up my the post, and I pulled out this book in Chinese. And I looked closely, and it had Rupa Unikrishnan in Chinese. It's my Chinese edition, so now I'm going to make money. The title of the book, by the way, so it's called, in English, it's The Career Catapult, Shake Up the Status Quo. In Chinese, it is make money. So I think we'll all do a little bit of that. But so let me talk to you a little bit about change. Sometimes change happens to our careers because we don't really anticipate it. The company decides company gets sold, the industry changes. Sometimes the skill set that you worked on and built over time has actually ceased to have any relevance, right? So, how many of you know that if you have Microsoft Word and you click on the top right-hand menu and you get the sort of edit, cut, paste, right? All of those used to be job categories at one point of time. And now they're not even the menu, but they're like a little spot on a menu, right? So jobs do evolve and change. And at that point, the jolt has happened to you. Change happens. So the whole philosophy that I try to talk about is how do you make change happen to yourself? We heard about, Anya, you decided, okay, now I can't just I need to learn how to sew to make this real. you sometimes need to step back and say, what is this next skill set I'm going to have to learn? Because I'm going to have to sort of catapult it a whole different thing. How does an accountant turn into the head of a large conglomerate, large company? It takes a series of concerted efforts to build out capabilities along the way. So how many of you know what this is that you're looking at? It says change happens, so clearly I'm going to tell you about change, but what is that building? Just take a wild guess. Okay, it's the Mercedes-Benz Museum in Stuttgart, in Germany. I see the Benz on the side. So this is a building that's built like a spiral. So you walk in and you take an elevator right to the top, and then you have to go around the outsides in a spiral. Okay, I'm going to make all of you stand up if somebody doesn't answer this question. Tell me, this is supposed to be interactive. I'm going to make you interact, guys. So what do you think the first exhibit in this museum of the Mercedes-Benz Museum in Stuttgart is? First exhibit, take a guess. A car, right? Not right, but yes. Keep guessing. One of you might get it. What do you hear? Interesting. A wheel, also interesting. None of you got it right, sorry. It's a horse. And those there, let's see if I can point, that's my daughter and son a couple of years ago, many years ago actually, they're much older. But it's a horse. So, Mercedes-Benz, it's a horse. Why? Why is because there was, in the sort of 1800s, you had Emperor Wilhelm. Now, here is a guy who says, I do believe in the horse. The automotive motive is no more than a transitory phenomenon. All right? Okay, so you think the guy was, full of it. No, he wasn't full of it, because this was the emperor who decided that he went to the Berlin Academy, got in a lot of trouble because these were the academics who were teaching philosophy, economics, that was the world, what's he talking about? He said, you're going to make an engineering school here. So this is an emperor who understood engineering, technology, and he made them set up a school even though they resisted. So here is a guy who actually understands that there is a wave heading towards me. So why was he saying this? There's a reason, because if you can imagine the 1800s, early 1900s Europe, they had cobble streets because that's what horses walked on, right? They built their houses in ways that you have a carriageway. You had a little circular area in front because they had a carriageway. People got off the carriage and the carriage went on. Their street lighting was such that they built it at a height that it wouldn't spook the horses. They build their lives around the horse. So how could they actually see a world where the horse was not central, right? So this is where, I think some of what happens in our average life is we take for granted something so significant. Now the automotive, I think 25% of this audience understands the impact of the automotive, right? Oil and natural gas, key driver. What happens when the next move happens? What is this next move? It's very hard for our heads to get around some of this sort of the big shifts that could be happening. I was at the end of that Mercedes-Benz event. Somebody asked me, okay, so you're all about disruption. What's the next big disruption? And I said, well, the next big disruption has to be to gravity. And they all rolled their eyes. This is a Mercedes-Benz drone. They're actually building out. There are sort of people drones that are going to maybe one day replace cars. So the fact that they're actually willing to experiment, I'm not saying that this is ever going to replace the car truly, but the fact that companies are experimenting behooves us to then look inwards and think about what can we be doing differently. I look at Trinidad and I say, okay, there's digital transformation happening, oil and natural gas actually not going away, but certainly going to be transforming. The online economy has shifted the way we think about our work, right? There are now, I'm going to bet that each of you may know somebody in their lives that is actually, a full-time on gigs, right? They don't actually have a full-time job, they do gigs, they consult. This is something that's now real, and in the U.S. certainly the assumption is by 2030 about 30 to 35% of employed people are going to actually be in the gig economy, maybe even more. What does that mean when you're sort of building around, the way healthcare is incentivized is to build around people having jobs, and so you get your insurance through your employer. That might change, and that is changing. What happens when you have assumptions about somebody's credit ratings that are based on, underlying it is a sort of a constant, predictable, economic, infusion into their bank? That may not happen because at a gig economy, some days you make 300,000, some years, and the others it's 100,000. What happens? How does that evolve, and how does that impact your business? Let's talk about somebody who sort of actually took her normal career and shifted it around a little bit. So here is Jessica Matthew. Born of Nigerian parents, she came to Harvard Business School, Harvard rather, and she and her sister both made it into Harvard. Their dad was kind of shocked because neither of them decided to take anything scientific or engineering, nothing serious. One of them turned into a drama major, and so she said, okay, I'll take economics, and sort of that both of us don't go thrown out of home. She came back home once to Nigeria and decided that she was watching people in their house. 80% of even sort of built-out towns have electricity issues, the lack of access to electricity. And she was watching how, they were in a party, and about halfway through the party, electricity goes off, everyone puts on, kerosene heaters and lights. And watching this, she steps out of the house and watches them, because she can't take the smoke in the house. She's watching the kids on the street and watching them play soccer, and the kind of vigor that they have, and the switch goes off in her brain. And she came back to Harvard and said, I'm not going to take the usual consulting job that I was taking, right? She decided that she was going to actually try and think of a way that you can take the energy that these kids put into kicking this ball and take that latent energy and turn it into electricity. Now, she was thinking theoretically because she was not a scientist. But what she did was she went back to Harvard, knocked on a bunch of doors and said, is this theory possible? And the next thing you know, she has a business called The Socket. And what this socket does is it's literally a battery that is hidden within this soccer ball. And as kids play, an hour of play turns into about 8 minutes of electricity that can be used to charge a lamp that can be twisted onto this soccer ball, or you can also sort of charge your phone. And so you start to see here somebody who actually had this theoretical idea, turned it into a product. But more importantly, what she did was using this network, she then created a system that was able to sort of take any human, any everyday object and turn those. And so she's waiting to launch this whole line of products. But one of the fans you see there is that guy over there. Big fan of his, Obama, right? She has now created a network of people who believe in this idea of just like from a momentary insight. Now, I heard that story and I thought, what is it that drives people like Jessica, right? It's not like she was in any way exceptional. Age 0 to 18, she would look like you and I. But there was this moment of insight, which then turned her into this deeply innovative thinker, but also an innovator and entrepreneur who's now shaking up this idea around energy, possibly coming in sort of, even if it's incremental. This is not about powering cities. This is about powering those villages in the back of beyond in interesting ways through energy that's actually available around you. How did this insight happen? So along the way, what I did was, having done my coaching experience and writing these blogs, I started doing some research. And I interviewed about 40 to 50 sort of key innovation drivers, including sort of the chief technology officer of Bell Labs. You remember Bell Labs? They used to churn out some amazing technologies. They had a hard time turning them into businesses. That was their problem. But, and I also did a survey of a group of entrepreneurs that I knew. There were actually 400 of them. And what I realized as I looked at the bios of those 400 people, you could divide them out into 3 groups, almost equal. True innovators, people who are creating products that had not been imagined before. Entrepreneurs, people who were setting up businesses, sometimes not all that innovative, but truly taking their lives in their hands and creating a business out of it, right? Soup to nuts, responsible for people's jobs and lives. And another 30% that were really focused on routine jobs. And I looked at the 3 groups and I thought, what is different about them? And they defined themselves that way too. These were people who said, I make change happen, but I don't define myself as a change maker in the big C kind of change. And that was fine. I really wanted these 3 groups to be represented in my research. There's a difference. And it's not that they were doing something, sort of some big eureka, here's the one secret thing that innovators do. The 3 groups behaved slightly differently in certain ways. And those slight differences made new businesses happen, new ideas come to fruition. And what are they? One is digging deep, right? This seems very basic. What is the value you bring to the table? And some of us do it, right? We do it annually. We do it when we're writing our self-assessment at the end of the year. We think about it. I don't know how rigorous we are. and one of the elements is, what are your core capabilities? What are the activities you perform that are consistently at a very high level of competency, right? Now, what I found with innovators is that they were not describing themselves in the routine fashion, right? They were not saying, I am a finance manager. They were not saying, I am, I'm an editor. This is not how they would describe themselves. The innovator was often describing themselves as the financial manager was sort of describing herself as, I'm the person who looks at the assets in our company and thinking through the best use of these resources, versus I do the books, right? Slightly different way of describing even that core competency. Motivating passion. These are people who, they don't really sort of need to be doing much with that motivation passion, but they are truly embedded in it. This is the person who picks up the newspaper and sort of, whether they like it or not, flips through to sustainability. Every morning they need to check whether there was something about their area of interest. So, and I said this, but nowadays I think newspapers are on our mobile phones. But these are people who will, whether this is they have time for it or not, they will make the time for their area of specialty, passion. My son, who actually is 15, it's very interesting. This is a guy's guy, he's one of those physically active kids. And yet you see a cooking show, right? Any culinary show, he'll stop and sit down and watch it. And so he's 15, and around 13, I come home one day, and he said, I was watching, what's the guy who swears at everyone, the British chef? Gordon Ramsay. I was watching Gordon Ramsay. He made this fish, Mom, and I'm like, oh, Lord, the kitchen was a wreck. The fish was fabulous. And there's no way, this guy does not think of himself as a chef, and I'm not talking to him that way, but I know somewhere in his life there's a restaurant in his future. But this is not how he defines himself. He's just passionate about cooking. We are out there, we're traveling to Africa, and he comes back with a box of spices. But this is not how he defines himself. That's okay. He knows that there is a passion in there. Black holes. When I talk to the company I work at now, automotives is a big part of what we have, and I call them blind spots, right? You have sometimes these situations where you're in there, you're kicking butt, you're putting data on the table, etc., and yet the room is not reacting. What's that about? It's because you haven't taken the time to connect with people, perhaps. Or maybe you're throwing data at a room that doesn't actually want data. They want experiences, right? So how do you actually understand what it is that is preventing you from being as successful as you are? And the way you address a black hole is to actually address it. You actually have to step out of that room that you're in and ask people. And very early on, one of my first conversations around a black hole was, I had a similar situation, and I said, what is going on? And they said, you know, you come across as somebody who's really kind and nice, but once the rubber hits the road, you're just really incisive, and you say it like it is. And I said, I thought that's a good thing. Now, the good thing would have been if you had given people intimation that that's how you are. So sometimes when I get into the room right now, you know, in these days, I will say, you know, all kidding aside, if this is not going to work, you really should go back and do the work before you talk to me about it, because I may not approve it. I need the data. And people know, okay, let's make sure we give her the right data. Making sure that you understand what could be standing in the way. So let me ask you a question. So stepping back and understanding these three things, core capabilities, passions, black holes. What do you think? So this 30% is what the average person would say the amount of time they will spend, or amount of people who are the sort of non-innovators, non-entrepreneurs who say that they regularly think about what their personal capabilities are, right? Who do the introspection. Any guesses on the entrepreneurs? So innovators, entrepreneurs, regular Joes, right? So let's talk about the entrepreneurs. What percentage of them do you think say they did introspection regularly, once a month? Stop and think about what they're doing right and wrong. Take a guess, or I'm going to make all of you stand up. What of you? What did you say? 70%. Not that much more. Not that much more. Innovators? 74%. And these people, like the innovators, when I would interview them, they were not saying, oh, once a month I sit down. They were like, no, every week, sometimes every day, I stop at night and I take 5 minutes. I'm mindful. They use the word mindfulness a lot more, right? You go to California, everyone says it. But, you know, in this sort of sample group, which was pretty global, innovators were talking about it. And they weren't saying they were sitting down with a pen and paper. And actually, you don't have to do that, right? You can do this when you're sitting there folding the laundry, cutting the vegetables, just stepping back and sort of at that point thinking through, what happened this week, this month? What happened what's emerging out there? And by the way, have I noticed something about what I've been thinking through? I mean, for me, actually, interestingly, I've sort of moved into a new industry 2 years ago, and I thought what I would be thinking about is, you know, we're in the automotive industry, I'll be thinking about no, what I have been thinking about is things like, you know, how many people are hearing differently? Should we be thinking about the sort of how we hear and engage with sound? I didn't expect that to be what I would think about, but I realized when I started thinking through what I spend my time reading, that's what I'm reading about. Sort of interesting. That insight is not going to happen if you just live your life, you know, minute by minute. That moment of introspection is important. This was an interesting number to me, because it's not the kind, you know, you kind of have to let the data speak. It's not the insight I thought I was going to come away with about what makes somebody innovative and take risks, etc., but it's one of the underlying insights in there. Stalking trends. Now this again, we all are fed so much information, but what are we doing with that information? I talk of this as, you know, the people I notice doing this well actually behave like panthers. So that's why I said stalking, not the creepy kind of stalking, the kind of cool kind of stalking where you're really engaging around this all the time. You're always watching. And one of my early times where I've actually felt like I did something with something I saw was as early as 99. I remember coming out at Christmas, after Christmas, and we were walking along the street on the Upper West Side, and every home, every apartment block had huge mounds of FedEx boxes out there. This was those early days when people were starting to engage around buying online, all their gifts and everything online. And I said to my husband, that's really interesting. This whole like buying stuff online is probably going to take off. Now, if I was really smart, I would have said, how do I set up a company that is going to ship online? I was not that smart. I wasn't even medium smart in the sense of saying, okay, maybe I'll set up a shipping company. It was just very low level smart. I bought some FedEx shares. It worked out. But the interesting thing is 99. Where has Amazon come from 99 to now, right? Remember, they were a bookshop. That's what they did. They were selling books. And now I think they're going to take over the world. But this ability to see a trend and then engage, right? How can you engage with a trend in a way that sort of can actually add to your life and maybe the lives of other people? Can you be creating jobs from something you saw? It's not a magical sort of big deal thing. So innovators said, I take the time, 53% of them said, I take the time almost on a weekly, monthly basis to sort of engage with my teams and say, what is this trend about? I just saw that everyone's walking around with these like strange looking wireless headphones. What's that going to do about, say, the number of accidents we might see? That's a trend. That might be something to talk about. 53%. Entrepreneurs, actually 50%, because these are guys and gals who are saying, how can I make money out of this for myself? I'm stuck in an organization I don't want to be in, or I know that I want to be my own boss, whatever it is, they're hungry. Average Joe or Jane, come up with a number for me. Come on. I'm looking at this side of the table, the room. Come on. Guy who's looking at his phone right there. I'm going to do this. If somebody says, shout out a name, number, what do you think? Just give me a number. What percentage of the average Joe is actually sort of sitting there thinking about trends, actively engaging around it? 45%. You lose. 25%. All right. All right. So not so radical, but radical enough to actually be able to sort of stop, take stock, and think about these trends differently, right? Now, third discipline that I talk about, that I see, is that this idea of using your assets and networks, right? So every one of you has a pretty solid network. If I were to go onto your LinkedIn's, I'd say between 100 to 50,000 contacts that you have. What does this network actually do for you? And I'll use an example. There was a startup company that could I have some water, please? Bottle. There was a sort of a startup company that came to me that actually does analytics, healthcare analytics. So in the U.S., and I suspect it's similar here, the sort of a good chunk, thank you, a good chunk of the healthcare dollar comes from companies and their sort of healthcare plans. Now, companies are constantly on the lookout to understand what can be done with this data, because they do sort of land up spending a lot. Where is their money being spent? So, if I were to sort of look at the number of, people in hospitals, people in doctors' offices, people who are healthcare workers, wherever you look, what percentage of the sort of people who are involved in the system would you say are women? A good chunk, right? So this startup comes to me, they're showing me their analytics. It's not providing great insights. And I was like, guys, and tell me what your group looks like. I mean, I don't want to write the check yet, because there's something about this algorithm that doesn't seem to be coming up with anything interesting. Because no matter what analysis they did, whether they're looking at Microsoft or the next door Subway, they were coming up with, okay, big chunk of you have cardiovascular diseases, big chunk of money is being spent in the ER. Okay, did I need a system to tell us that? Should you be telling me how many of them actually have home health care related duties, perhaps, right? How many of them actually have, a broader network of maybe they see a primary care, do they see a primary care physician versus just going to the ER every time they have a problem? Is this an interesting system? So I said, tell me about your team. What percentage of this team, they were only about 8 people, 7, what percentage of this team do you think was, so it's Boston, white male, lady in nice gray, 60%, 100%. And that's the same as their advisors as well. And these were not, And these were not, I mean, like they had an advisory board. These were not people who were bad, they had bad intentions. These were not people who said, I'm going to go out and just get a fully male. No, these were not people who set out to do it the wrong thing. This was their network. This is what they could, it's a startup. This is what they could leverage. This was who they were, right? So now, as a person who was going to sort of thinking through putting some money in, I could say, go away, don't like this. Go away, do your homework. I did a little more. All I did was I said, I got a few names I'm going to hand to you, right? Do you guys remember there was, Romney got into trouble for this idea about a binder full of women, remember? Americans may remember this. He sort of said, I have lots of women. I have binders full of women that I know. Well, we need binders full of women, right? If we want to make change happen, we need to actually tell them that they have options there. So I said to them, here are the 5 or 6 women I know. Just go meet them. Guess what? They went, they met them. They added a product management role, which happened to have a woman that they found. And they actually added 2 very senior women in healthcare, because healthcare is one of those spaces we do have women in senior roles. And this was them indicating to me, but also to themselves, that they recognized they had a problem. Now, think about your own LinkedIn groups, your own network, right? My network, I can tell you, before I even stopped to think about this, I had 2 types of people. One is people who worked in companies that I'd worked in before, right? Pfizer, BlackRock, etc. And the other was Indians. I'm from India. And so these were the sort of networks I had. But when I stopped and sort of started thinking through hearing, when I stopped and started thinking through blockchain, what do I know about blockchain? Nobody in my network actually could be my advisor on some of this stuff, right? I had to take the work, make the work happen to get to a sort of a more interesting network out there. So as you all are thinking through, whether it's your own lives and your careers, or maybe, many of you might have children who you're thinking through their futures. For one, I don't think I know many chefs, and I need to get to know a lot of chefs if the son's going the way I think he's going, right? What about you guys, right? What is the 1 or 2 sort of big shifts in your environment that you're thinking through that might be interesting, right? As Trinidad engages differently in its work, as your company engages differently, as energy evolves, I see energy, oil and natural gas companies investing in sustainability. What is it that you need to know to keep your career evolving, right? Whether inside of your company or external to that company. And do you have people in your network who can get you there? The simplest thing, go to conferences, or sort of it's actually cold call. Write a note to somebody and say, you don't know me from Adam, sorry to do this, but I want to follow you so that I can learn what there is to be, what's new, what's interesting in your industry. And then you can next ask them if they'll have coffee with you. There's nothing like somebody who invites you and says, have coffee with me and tell me what jobs there are in your company. Don't do that. What you can do, though, is develop you develop a relationship, even online, certainly offline. You want to sort of be subtle about your ability to engage. But this network is an active network that you need to create. So back to this. When I asked innovators, what do you think about networking? Is this a primary responsibility, as in the top 3 things you do with your life to keep your ideas flowing? Innovators, 40%. Entrepreneurs, 35%. What do you think the rest? People in the routine job said. And we are all being told, by the way, that we need to network, right? 10, 18, better. But still, the slope is pretty deep, right? And this is after years. How many books are there about networking, right? How many books have you read? How many people have told you to network? Every professor you knew, right? And here's where we are. This is a serious, important piece. I'm getting towards the end. I mean, like when we talk about our prototypes, our careers, one of the things I talk to people about is the fact that you need to actually design actively your life, right? So what we heard from Claire, what we heard from some of our speakers was this sort of ability to think not on a linear line. If you know where your career is starting and ending, you know, it's probably not going to be interesting. But more importantly, with the pace of change, there are roles that have now come in, gone out, and come in again. Like, you know, when I've, at least 3 times in my life when I've told my dad what I'm doing, I've had to then explain what that role meant, right? Innovation officer. What's an innovation officer? Talent lead. What? There's such a thing, right? I'm doing strategy consulting when I first came out of school. That had to be explained. And God knows what else is along the way, right? So that's just me, but there are so many roles. Chief digital officer. What does that mean, right? And how is that emerging and evolving? These are sort of roles that are shifting, and that you can actually shift as you engage, because you're bringing whole new insights into this game. I talk about this idea of bottling serendipity. So when Jessica Matthews sort of saw this moment of this kid kicking the ball and had this idea, that's energy, it could be another type of energy, that is a moment of serendipity. How do you bottle it? How do you take that idea and sort of work on it? And the book sort of lays out a couple of techniques, including just actually capturing that insight and saying, what is the extreme version of that idea, right? Design thinking. Once you've laid out an idea, don't stop. You constantly have to test it, improve on it, tweak it, test it again, and that's design thinking. And rapid prototyping, which is craft something out of it and then keep testing again the new versions of that prototype. So you know all of this when it comes to products, right? How do I take this water bottle and make it better? What about your own life? Rapid prototyping with your life and with your career is about sort of testing it out, either by saying, hey, here's a startup that can't afford an accountant. I'm going to get involved in this startup, not because I'm an accountant and I'll do it for free, but because they're in a space, sustainability, that I don't know anything about. So I'm going to get to spend time with these people and learn this space. Or I'm going to, actually do a sort of an internship. Yes, I'm midway in my career, but I'm going to intern as in a nonprofit, and I'm going to take on a whole new responsibility. I've never done financial management. I'm going to become treasurer of this nonprofit because they don't have anyone doing this, right? Is that going to actually pivot you into a whole big job in a bank? Maybe not, but it's certainly going to give you an insight about resource management that you probably didn't have. Go to conferences. The only way I'm going to learn about blockchain is to diversify my network. I've actually, literally, I've told my husband this, I'm going to have to go out and get to know a lot of young white guys. They're the ones who are doing blockchain research. He knows, he's okay with it. But I think similarly, if you're going to actually then take that idea and sort of say, I want to sort of create a blockchain that is related to automotives, which is my industry, that actually becomes something real inside of your company. And you can always do that, right? I mean, there are enough spaces out there where a normal business has 99% of its resources focused on the current day. It has to be. It's making money. It's got to meet its payroll, right? That 1% it is in putting into innovation. You can always sort of engage with that 1% and say, putting my hand up, I'll do this on Saturday mornings, I'll make sure I'm involved. That's a way to actually have relevance in your current job and also be pushing the boundaries. You become very valuable to a company. I'll take it to case somebody who I'm very proud of. This is Laila Chirayat. She came out of business school, out of Harvard, actually, not business school, African Studies. She had just finished her graduate degree, was looking for a job, decided to join our consulting practice. We decided to hire her. I was sort of interviewing at Harvard, and we got her on board. Her whole experience was academics, Africa, economics, and she said, I don't know much of any of these businesses. Now, I had just sold a project out in India with an outsourcing company, so it was me. And the life that I'm talking about is you get in a plane on a Sunday night, and you're back 2 weeks later, you get a week at home, and then rinse and repeat for the next 8 months, right? This is the life I'm talking about. So I sold this piece of work, this project, because I was working towards being a partner, and nobody wanted to take on this global trip for 8 months. And Laila said, okay, I'll join. So I look at her, she looks at me, and I'm like, okay, you don't know much about outsourcing? You know what? I don't know much about outsourcing. We're going to learn together. That's the consultant's life. You have to become an expert like that. But the interesting thing is we go on, we take on this project, and what she starts realizing is this is a story of transformation in India, right? So in India, when independence happened to us, when Gandhi got us there, we were mostly a natural resources-oriented agricultural country. And then there was a group of people spearheaded by our first prime minister who decided we were going to build out engineering colleges. And then fast forward 40 years, and we have an outsourcing business that is 60% of the technology business is 60% of the economy, all because of some very specific decisions that got made. She looks at this whole story and says, why can't that be the same in Kenya? And so she goes back to Kenya on her summer vacation. She sort of plots out what could happen, and she realizes there are every street in Kenya has an internet cafe, and every cafe has usage between 6 a.m. to about 9 a.m. and then 4 p.m. to about midnight. That middle of the day, the place is the guy who owns it is swatting flies. And she says, okay, you have a problem, you have excess capacity. The guy sitting outside, there are a whole bunch of young men and women who are unemployed, who are just, getting into trouble. She says, if you could engage those people to come into your cafes, there might be something here for you. And so she lays out some training, and she says, if you can teach them basic data entry, I will make sure you have some data to enter. And she goes back to California, talks to Google, and sort of convinces them this is possible. And so with a network of about 20 internet cafes, she starts a business. Fast forward 5 years, she's not only got an outsourcing company that works for Google's autonomous drive business, J&J, all kinds of companies, right? She's also built a second line of business in healthcare and a third line of business in beauty, all of them sourcing talent and resources in Africa, creating jobs in Africa, 20,000 jobs. All right, this young lady did this. Now, here was an analyst who took a moment of a serendipity, this idea that you can make the same model that happened in India happen elsewhere, because there was nothing exceptional apart from the access to internet. The fact that she knew this space, so she had built a network, and she actually had to go back to Africa and build a network to understand what this technology potential was. She experimented, she prototyped, and so she took this young analyst who could just be in consulting, turned into this, high-flying. That's her with Mohammad Yunus, the Nobel Prize winner. That's her in an ad for Sorel, and she's everywhere. That is rapid prototyping of yourself and your career, right? I'm very proud. It's like seeing your baby fly, except she's not my baby, but I was involved in her. So it's nice. I have in front of you, actually, and we are actually probably running out of time, right, Neeraj? But we have in front of you two sides to a page. One piece is about sort of really thinking through your network, right? So go off and think about it. But here's a piece that's related to thinking about you challenging your definition, your dominant logic. So what is dominant logic? In companies, Ram Charan writes about this, which is every company thinks of itself a certain way. When I was at Pfizer, we thought of ourselves as being in the pill business, right? At one point, you produced medicines to deal with illnesses. Now, a lot of pharmaceutical companies have realized the real money in it is actually in thinking about health, in preventative care. So vitamins, etc. This switch from thinking about yourself as solving illnesses to sort of providing health is a big flip in how you think about the dominant logic, what you do in yourself. So dominant logic is about what you do, how you do this work, and how it is that you will actually make it available to people. So when I ask each of you to take that worksheet home, what I'm going to ask you to do is to do 4 things. Think about the value you create, right? Are you in the business of accounting, or are you in the business of managing resources, understanding assets? Think about when it is that you do your work. Is it from 9 to 5? Or could the work that you do actually be done better from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. because you really want to spend time flying kites, hanging out with the kids, I don't know, what else it is, doing your Olympic sport, whatever that is, right? Where is it that you work? Conventional idea, you work within 4 walls of an office. New idea, you can work from your couch or at the Starbucks. What is the next new idea? Is it virtual? Is it sort of a different model? That's something to be done. What is the method? How do you deliver value, right? Let's talk about Starbucks. Starbucks used to deliver, sort of took the idea of a coffee shop and turned it around, and they said, our value is in creating a space where people can sit and work and be, and they will actually buy some coffee. And now, egg rolls. But the point is, what is this method in which you're actually driving this value? Is this you sort of saying, I will put pen to paper, create spreadsheets, or am I going to be out there, changing, lobbying for new ways of using the spreadsheet in our world? That's a piece of work I would like for you all to think about. And in doing so, here's a skill. Now, here's a German. Germans are great at thinking through, creating new words, right? Gedanken experiment is actually the German word for the thought experiment. So, you recognize who he is. So, when he thought up E is equal to MC squared, he wasn't sitting there just writing up equations one at a time. He writes about how, what he did was one day he woke up in the morning and he thought about, if I were the size of a photon of light, and there was a sort of a photon moving through space, what would it take for me to go around this photon of light and come back home? It was an elegant thought experiment which resulted in a whole new space in physics. Don't ask me more. That's about as far as my science engagement is. But if you were to step back and think through, we try to do this with your kids, right? What would it look like if you actually were in this position? Maybe even if you just sort of say, what would it look like to be in your boss's role? And really think it through fully. Engage with it with as much information as you have. Every element of that job, engaging with the board, talking through issues, really think it through. The moment you start doing that, you can actually identify elements that you have to do, elements of work you have to do, skills you have to create, networks you have to build, that you can then start actually acting upon. So, this is about going from being a passive participant in your career to a much more active participant. A very simple technique, but one that actually does require you to do some homework, internal homework, as you build this thought experiment out. Now, you say, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. If you've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, think that piece through. The fact that you're going to have to be a boss, you're going to actually have to manage the books, whatever it is. Think that whole piece through. That's an element around design thinking that is superbly helpful as you think this through. Finally, what is this idea of go extreme, the fifth piece? Now, this one I actually will bring it home to us ladies. How many of you have read the Harvard Business Analysis, which talks about, and this is sort of fascinating. I actually appreciate what guys do a lot. Good job there, you guys. Because a guy looks at a job description and he says, I can do about 40% of this. I'm going to apply. What do you think the number is for women when they look at the job description and say, do I want to apply or not? 70%. You need to know, a woman needs to feel like she can do 70% before she'll actually apply for the job. I'm not saying what's up with these guys. I'm saying great job, guys. Good stuff. That's the confidence we need, right? Now, there's some new LinkedIn research which says that women do a lot more research, a lot more thinking before we apply. When we apply, we are more, often almost as successful as men, right? So that's good. When we apply, when we get in there, do the interview, we're as successful. Now, if that was the case, maybe us being careful is not such a bad thing, except when you look at the way headhunters look at information on LinkedIn, apparently when they do a quick search, right, they want to fill a social media job, and then they'll get a list. They are 35% more likely to click on the male profile than on the female profile, right? So there is already a bar to climb over there. So if you're going to be so self-selective out of the problem, and then you add on this sort of 30% bar that you have to cross, suddenly you've laid out a 50% bar in front of you, right, when you do the math. And you're actually putting yourself behind. So some of what you need to do is to sort of work on what does it take for you to push yourself into risk-taking mode? How do you make it easier? How do you de-risk this big move in your life? Whether it is creating a whole new job, or asking for the project that's going to keep your career going, or even sort of being at that next event that sort of forces you to build out your network. These are de-risking strategies we will need in order to get over the system that says you're too short to be a jet fighter, right? Because that may not be the right category, but how are they going to know if you don't take that big step? So first thing is the imposter syndrome. This is one of the key issues that has been defined. You look at this, you say, I've only got 60% of this job down right now. The rest of me ain't worth it, right? And there's also the piece where you have women in extremely successful positions who are constantly saying, somebody's got to find me out. Now, this is an issue with many successful, male or female. It affects women more because of the structural issues that are standing in our way, right? So don't let the imposter stories prevent you from succeeding. And that usually turns into self-talk, right? So how do you shift self-talk? If you're spending your time with asking yourself questions that have a yes-no answer, there's a 50% chance you'll answer no, right? It's just the logic of that statistic. If you instead ask the how question, right? Can I succeed versus how can I succeed? The how question is sort of part of the important part of having that self-talk that's actually more constructive. De-risk. This can be, very clear de-risking strategies. Taking on a new job, moving to Alaska. What is it that you need to do? Is it looking at your finances and saying, if I move, if I take this other job and it goes terribly, can I manage the 1 year or half a year that may take for me to switch jobs if I had to just resign the next day, right? That's one way to think about it. Get yourself a financial planner, right? De-risk yourself other ways. If I don't get an MBA, if I don't get that next degree, am I going to be able to make the next step? Well, you don't always have to pick up and go elsewhere. You can sort of skill yourself other ways. Ask yourself what it is that prevents you today from making that next move. And then having identified that, right? Money, respect, relationships, it can be any of these. Ask yourself, how do you then de-risk that, right? If it's a relationship, really think through, can this relationship last? And if it doesn't last, is that okay, right? Really engage with the risk and de-risk it. And then tell the story. Like, storytelling is a critical element of what I found with some of these innovators that I spoke to. They spoke of themselves in whole new interesting ways, right? They weren't saying, I'm somebody who's thinking of potentially doing okay. They were saying, I believe in blockchain, and I'm going to go off in a couple of years and I'm going to start this company. This couple of years could be 10 years, but they didn't care. They were starting that company, right? And you were like, all right. You kind of start thinking of themselves as somebody who happens to be something else before they start this company. And then the self-talk, also the storytelling, both helps them, but it also helps the network start thinking through, okay, if this guy is going to start this company in blockchain, I got to connect him with these other people, because people really want to be part of a good story, right? So the storytelling element is a big part of how you make that big next shift. So these are the 5 disciplines I write about. Sorry, I've been talking a lot, partly driven by timing, partly driven by the fact that this is a evening, And I think I got some nods out there. So, but I think these are the 5 big disciplines that will help as you're thinking about these big shifts in your lives, in your careers, transformation. All right? So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Do we want to do Q&A or, yeah? Any questions, any thoughts? Have you been using, what is it called, Slido? No? What percentage of you are currently thinking through, put up your hand if you're thinking through 1 or 2 technologies that you have no clue what they mean? Good. Some number. Why aren't the rest of you thinking about it? Because technology is going to evolve and disrupt your careers and lives. Right? All right. No Q&A? Are we good? All right. Oh, yes. Yeah. I'll be out there signing books, yes, so please come by. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rupa Unikrishnan. Another round of applause, please. As we near the end of today's official program, we actually have a special giveaway.
Yeah, really quick. This one
multiplied
by 4. We're going to call out the names, and what you're going to do is after everything is, after we've come to the natural conclusion, you can make your way across to the surgical booth to receive your gift bag. So let me ask Rupa if she could.
You want to pick all 4?
Yeah, pull some names, yeah. Thank you so much for assisting us with the names. And this is for Sajiko. After that, we will have the vote of thanks. And then after the vote of thanks, the cocktail and network session. As we mentioned, that's going to be a very interesting session as always.
Okay, so this is Tanya. Is it
Sana? Sanoa?
It looks like Sinanan. Is it Tanya? Or is it Svan?
Is it Banker?
You're a banker?
Can you give me
Any
a hand?
Tanyas here?
Can we get that name? If you hear the name,
Get started on the next one.
We'll try another one.
Should we move on?
Yeah,
Don't mind,
we'll
don't
go
mind,
on.
yes.
No Tanyas?
So we get a next name, because she's clearly not here.
No. Then they'll get weird calls. So should we move on?
Yeah, we'll move on to another name.
Okay. Here's the second one.
Stacy Welch.
All right.
Stacy, so you could go and collect by the surgical booth. Excellent. Yes.
That's great. All right, third one. Or do we consider this a second one?
So this is Carla Joseph.
Carla?
Joseph.
That's Carla right
All
there?
right, Carla.
Carla says to jump up,
Congratulations.
scream it. No, that was
Carla going one time. I love that. Very proactive.
Cute.
She ain't even waiting. Yeah, man. One
Oh,
time.
there she is.
Excellent. Congratulations.
a third.
All
Yes.
right.
This is Gail Clapperton. Gail.
That's Gail right there.
Hey,
Congratulations,
Gail.
Gail.
Congratulations. And we have one more.
They folded this real well here. All right.
This is Raquel Lee Asang. Raquel.
Congratulations, Raquel.
Congratulations.
So I
and
think we
thank
have covered
you.
all
Thank
4
you.
names.
Thank you.
Let me invite to move the vote of thanks Estelle Narayan, Vice Chair, Chamber Experience and Imagine Committee. Is Image? All right then. We'll go with that.
You're welcome. It is Imagine.
Hi everyone, I have the privilege this evening of thanking all of you for being present and being a part of AMCHAM's 6th Women in Leadership Conference 2019. I've actually been from inception when we started this 6 years ago as a Networking Women series, and to see the growth 6 years ago to now in 2019, when you look across at the room, we've really grown at great capacities and lengths, and I'm very proud to be part of that. I hope that at the end of today's session that you would have felt at least motivated to be more inclusive, more as a person and as a company embracing inclusion, as well as supporting each other on our journeys together as we continue to grow. And of course, as we leave here today, that we pretty much push for gender parity, both males and females, and with the goal, of course, of being balancing for better as we continue to go forward this year. Looking at everybody around here, pretty much what I'd like to do is say thank you, first of all, to the speakers, because if we didn't have all these amazing speakers today, we would not have had such a successful day. So I'd first like to thank our very own President, Patricia Ghani, for AMCHAM Trinidad and Tobago. Our keynote address this morning, which was by Senator the Honorable Paula Gopi-Schoon. Then our feature address speaker, Susie Teal, who did a fantastic job, thank you. Our moderator, Giselle Thompson, who did a fabulous job with her inclusive panel of Susie Teal, Stephen Banyarol, Shamla Maharaj, and Thora Best. Thank you very much. And then this afternoon, we'd like to thank Claire Fitzpatrick for a great job, and of course the panel that was moderated by Rocio Madeira Bolivar, thank you. And of course you had Claire Fitzpatrick, Mr. Juvis Warner, Anya Ayangchi, thank you very much, and Hema Ramkisoon. And last but not least, speaker this afternoon, Rupa Onikrishan, thank you very much. Her book will be available outside for sale, and of course it's at a cost of $150, so you can check her book outside on your way. In addition to the speakers, of course, everything that you see around us is possible because of our sponsors. So I'd like to thank our title sponsor, BP Trinidad and Tobago, our gold sponsors, Scotiabank Trinidad and Tobago, E-Zone and Unicoma, our silver sponsors, United Airlines, Pan American Life Insurance Group, then our bronze sponsors, ESA Oilfield Supplies Limited, Southern Sales Service Limited, and our media sponsor, Heartbeat Radio. When you guys came in today, this morning for registrations, you would have received a bag with a lot of goodies in it. So I want to say thank you to the contributors who kindly donated and contributed the items, which would be Scotiabank Trinidad and Tobago, AMCO, Massey Distribution, Hadco, Nestle, Unilever, Sagico, Caribbean Jobs, Oscar Francois, Unicoma, TSL, Sasha, Ultra Farm, Republic Financials Holding Limited, Universal Foods, Elizabeth Parker Harris representing Hope, helping our people everywhere, United Airlines, and Pan American. Thank you all very much for all the items that you contributed and donated to make our body bag heavy. Right? So I just want to say thank you for the support. We appreciate it. Before you leave, there are feedback forms on the table. We just ask you if you could just give us some feedback so we know what we can do better next year. And I'll turn you over now to JW. Thank you very much.
So yet again,
thank you, Estelle.
Thank you. I want to thank you guys for having me yet again, and of course to Shala for being here with me.
Yes.
And
thank you, Jason, for being a great co-host. This is my first day with you guys, and hopefully it's not my last.
No, it was fantastic. Shala, you were amazing, and I enjoyed sharing the moment with you. So here is where we enjoy the cocktails and we network.
Or juice on the rocks.
Yes, the Ribena on the rocks, and of course, our friends at TTT. Give it up for TTT, man, for bringing this to the wider audience this year. My good friends at TTT, so we give thanks. So here's where we network and knock a glass and have conversations.
And thank you, AMCHAM Trinidad and Tobago, for having us. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please have a great afternoon and a great weekend.